So welcome everyone. Tonight for Photo Time with Consistently Creative Crew, we decided to talk about converting your traditional scrapbook albums into digital books. And this is something that a lot of us need to do or maybe want to do. So we're going to go ahead and get started with just a general of why might you want to digitize your traditional scrapbooks? Well, you can kind of see from the picture there all of those albums that are piled up on the table, actually, once they are digitized and reprinted as photo books, they take up a significantly smaller amount of space. But a couple of other reasons are maybe because it's a good backup just in case your originals are destroyed or damaged by fire, flood, natural disasters, just general wear and tear. You also have the ability of accessing digital copies when you're not at home, which it's really hard to do when the books are on the shelf at home. You can also easily make multiple copies. If anybody listening has actually made multiple copies of the same album traditionally, that's actually a lot of work. It's much easier to hit print 2 copies when you're ordering a digital book. Also, as I mentioned before about saving space and weight, Cheryl can attest to the fact that when she was moving and having to carry around the boxes of her traditional scrapbooks, they are quite hefty and a challenge to lift. And then finally, future generations might not want your traditional albums, and you're not really sure what's going to happen to them, but you've invested a lot of time and energy and effort and love into creating those traditional scrapbooks. So digitizing them is a way to preserve them and kind of ensure that they are going to outlive you. And Cheryl is going to share a little bit about her process of what she did, and then I'll get into the details. So Cheryl, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will spotlight your table with your album.
All right, so I am not at home. I'm in Peg's backyard in her lovely barn. I guess you call it a carriage shed. But anyway, so I don't have my normal setup here. So I'm going to try and hold my camera above. But this is one of my favorite albums that I have digitized and then converted into a book. So this is my daughter's wedding album. So this was one of the, I don't know if we call it Fab to Fab or whatnot, what they called it. It was, some of it was already decorated. The pages were pre-decorated. And so anyway, I can't turn it. Sorry. So anyway, so this is basically, a regular album that I did for my daughter's wedding. And I made this one for myself. And then I digitized, and this is what it looks like as a book. Hang on, I'm gonna try and
stunning cover.
That is gorgeous.
So Kari helped me with the cover. This was one of the favorite photos from the wedding, and just put a very similar little title there. And that the last page of the book actually is a similar photo in black and white with a similar box, but Kari created all of this, and it wraps around to the back, so it shows the beautiful setting that was at the wedding. So
and show the spine if you can.
Spine has,
nice.
Is it focusing?
Yes, it's pretty good.
So I just had the date at the bottom, and then Chris and Becca wedding. And I love the weight of the pages. So it just starts with like a white page, and then there's this very pretty, you can't really tell, but it's sort of like vellum. It just is kind of a fancy way to start it. And Kari also helped me because I had not had this filled in yet because I was going to have my daughter do this in calligraphy, but Kari actually was able to go in on the image, the digital scan. So I took this book apart. I took the album apart. Sorry, I didn't even say the process. Took the album apart, sent in the pages, Forever scanned them, then put them into my Forever account. And then from there, Kari helped me. I think we did the same color on every page. It's just outlined in a slight gray just to make it look consistent. And anyway, so the pages are definitely thicker than like a regular, I don't even know how to explain it. They're not
They're a heavier weight than
yeah,
just a
they're
regular
in
printed
my
book.
opinion, they're like the perfect weight. They're not like I've had the flimsy like the CVS or Snapfish books that are like super flimsy, but they're thick. And this one is the lay flat in the middle, so when you open it, it just lays perfectly. Am I able to, if I hold this up and turn it, is it too late now let me see. I don't want to make y'all dizzy, but
Oh, it worked.
That
oh,
worked. Oh,
oh,
that looks great.
that's better. Okay. I'm sorry. Now if I unplug from the wall, I think I'll okay. So you can see the lay flat here in the middle. Try it. Let's see this way.
It looks great.
It's so hard.
You're good. It's hard without a
Anyway,
stand, but you're doing
um,
awesome.
and the regular traditional album, I'll say, is probably at least 2 inches thick and probably weighs, oh, golly, gotta be. It seems like it's 10 pounds. I don't know how much it weighs. And this is, fraction of that, obviously. So anyway, love the process and I love working with Kari. She is very helpful. She will help you figure out the best pricing, the timing. There's always different sales coming. She's really good about keeping you in the know on that. And I just want to get to the end because I want to show you that last picture. So see, that's what we copied on the cover. This was the black and white, and then there's that. And this was a photo that, I had done earlier, and then to, do this to make it look similar. So anyway,
Turned out
the
great.
process was very easy. I've done now, I think, I don't know, 6 or 8, sending in the pages and having the books done. And then they come back and they're this thin, as opposed to like my book from Texas. When we're in Texas, it's like it's massive. It's too thick, but I'm like, whatever. I needed to get it all in one book, so it's like this thick, and now I have a little Texas book. I love it. So anyway.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I know you had to just pop on and then run. So thank you so much for stopping in so you could show that, because that album is just amazing and gorgeous.
Thank you for all of your help.
Thanks,
All right.
Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye, everybody.
All right. So now, did I share the right screen?
Digitize your traditional scrapbook.
Yes, good.
Main reasons.
All right. All right. So a couple of questions that you want to ask yourself when you're starting this process. Do you want to print the album pages into a new book? Do you want to keep the digital images for the future, or do you want to do both? So like Cheryl showed that book, that was one she definitely wanted to reprint into a book, but you don't have to do that. You can actually just digitize your album pages and save them, and you don't have to reprint them. So that is always an option. But by digitizing them, you actually have opened up some additional possibilities for yourself. So I'm going to share some details about that tonight. So like Cheryl mentioned, the steps to take in turning a traditional album into a digital book. First, you want to digitize your traditional album. So you're going to have to disassemble your album, and then you're going to have to scan those pages. Then you want to be sure that you're storing whatever images you have, and be sure that you're following 3-2-1 backups, because if you're doing this as a backup to your traditional albums, if you're not backing up those images, there's still a chance that you could lose them. And I'd hate to see that happen. So then I recommend using artisan software, potentially an online platform to create a digital album from those scans. And then I encourage you to proofread your album really carefully before ordering it to be printed. It is very easy to make a mistake or have a typo. And so you want to be certain that you have everything correct before you order the album. So step one, digitizing your traditional album. So there's a couple of options. You can do it yourself. You can hire someone to do this for you. So doing it yourself, if you do have access to a large flatbed scanner that will handle a 12 by 12 page, if you're doing a 12 by 12 album, it is a lot of work to use a smaller scanner and digitally stitch those images together. I honestly have done some of that digitally stitching them together. It's a challenge to try to get everything lined up and everything at the right angle. So I really encourage the use of a large flatbed scanner. And there are some that you can purchase that are 12 by 18. So if you have a lot of albums, that might be something you might want to look into. There are some libraries that have large flatbed scanners that you can do this at. Just a caution, the flatbed scanners, they have a glass bed, just like any smaller scanner, and those are really easily scratched. And so sometimes the users at the libraries are not as careful about their fingernails or a ring or something else that might be scuffing up that glass on that flatbed. So you want to be sure when you're scanning them that you take a good look at the flatbed and try to ensure that it's, one, doesn't have any fingerprints on it, but two, look for any scratches. I do recommend, and kind of the industry standard is to scan at 300 DPI, possibly 400 DPI, depending on your machine. But if you're wanting to scan an album page, and then what you ultimately want to do is to zoom in to actually recover a photo and just get an image of that photo, I would recommend scanning at a higher resolution than the 300 DPI, because you're going to end up, if you're trying to go into like a 4:6 photo, you really want a little bit higher resolution in order to get into that. The other option is you can hire somebody to do this for you. I do this locally for a number of people, but also Fever will do that at their Green Bay facility, and that's always a great option. Some comments about those digital images. Once you have the digital images from those scan pages, there's a few things that you might want to do with them before you store them and preserve them. So this is a page that I scanned that was in my album. You can't really tell from the image, but this gold item here on this gray card is actually a pin. So it is actually metal. And it is sticking up a little bit in my traditional scrapbook. But this album page, the file will actually have a date of when I scanned it, which is not the date that the event took place, because I am not anywhere close to being scrapbooking current. So it's not even close to the same year. So you do want to fix the date on the image to be the date the photos were taken or close. Depending on what you're using, if you can use fuzzy dates, that's helpful. With Forever, you can actually do this for an entire album all at one time, which is an awesome way to do all this. So some comments about metadata, and I wanted to share this. I learned a few new things recently on a training, and there's a few things to kind of point out about the Forever platform. So when you are in the Forever platform, this album page was scanned and saved into my Forever account. And you can change the name of the album page. You can add an unlimited description or story about it. And since this was actually from a cruise, I put the itinerary and all the information about that cruise on all of the album pages. I did it all at once. I adjusted the date taken to be actually the date that the cruise was, the day we were actually in Kuala Lumpur. It's also sometimes helpful to know what date you uploaded it. You can know the file size. You can do additional tags. So I have here a tag that says Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. You can also place this file in multiple albums. So this happened to be a page that I sent to Forever to be scanned by them. Even though I do most of my album pages here at home, I wanted to work through the process with them and see how it worked. So what this album that says 2004 Malaysian Cruise, I don't know that you can read that. This is an album that they created because I sent in a whole stack of album pages and I labeled it with 2004 Malaysian Cruise. And so that's how they identified all of them. Then I had an album myself that I stick in my Forever account with my scanned scrapbook albums, and I actually called it 2004-05 Malaysian Cruise. So the interesting thing about the way the storage works is that each item in the library is only there one time and only taking up enough space for one copy, but it can be in multiple albums. It can have multiple tags, but the fact that it doesn't have to be in there twice or multiple times saves you some space. So a couple of additional comments about metadata is that many platforms allows you to edit that metadata, but unfortunately, almost every platform doesn't allow that data to be exported out. So if you have an album page like this or something that's digitized, and you are editing some of that information like what I showed here, the name, the description, the date taken, and you take it out of that platform, it is not being saved in a format that can actually be taken out of that platform. And that is very, very common because most of the companies are not doing it to be compliant with the metadata standards. In addition, some companies frequently change what metadata is exported. So you might test it now and it's fine, and then 6 months from now, it's not fine, or the vice versa. So I really recommend doing your research before investing a lot of time and energy into editing your metadata if you're using any type of platform other than the Forever platform. And then a reminder, because those of you who've listened to me previously, I just want to remind you about good backup practices. So be sure once you have these digitally scanned album pages and that you're following good backup practices. And somebody shared this image recently on a training, and I thought it was really ideal. So you should have 3 copies of your photos, being 1 original and 2 backups. They should be stored on 2 different types of media or platforms, and 1 backup should be offsite. And if you are storing with Forever, they will maintain that for you because they maintain 3 backups on 3 different systems, and they are all in different locations. But if you are managing this yourself, be sure that you're managing this following good backup practices. And then you can stop here if you don't actually plan on printing an album. But if you are planning on printing an album, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of points. One is using artisan software or an online platform. What's the difference between them? So on an online platform, depending on whatever templates are available, you may or may not get the full image of the scrapbook page, especially if there are important photos, text, or other things near the edges. Most of the time when an album page is scanned, it is not a true 12.000 by 12.000 paper to begin with. So when you go to try to fit it in a photo spot on a pre-designed template that is square, you are probably going to lose something. So that's not always an optimal option, and that's because our papers and our pages are not perfectly 12 by 12. In Artisan, you can do it yourself. There's a free template available from Pixels to Pages to do this. I did create a video tutorial in order to use it. It's really easy to do. I will probably flip over near the end and show that. or you can hire me. So what I did with Cheryl is we worked over Zoom, and as she showed you the cover, we designed her cover and the spine and the background colors for the pages, because again, they're not perfectly 12 by 12. And so in order to get as much of the page, much of the image on the printed page, you're going to have a little bit of space around it. I always recommend doing a really, really careful proofing of all of the things on your album before actually ordering it to be printed, including your cover, your spine, your background colors, that you're centering your image on the page. And you have to remember that you want to be sure that your entire image is printed. And since scans are not perfectly square, it is not going to be a perfectly square image that's printed on the page. Our eye can't necessarily tell the difference, but the software knows that it's not 12.000 by 12.000 inches. And then ordering your album, and like Cheryl indicated, there are always a number of discounts, and the club discount 5% is always available to people who are club members. And there's also 50% off books. It doesn't happen often, but if you are waiting for it and wanting a sale, you can always let me know. So my call to action is decide what's the best way to digitize your album. Do you want to do it yourself or hire someone else? And be sure you edit the information on the image with the, and you can do all that information using the bulk editing feature, and then just edit your dates so they're actually close to when the event actually happened. And be sure you back everything up. And if you want to create a digital book, you can do it yourself or have someone else do it. Be sure to proofread and order your book. And before I wrap up, actually, are there any questions? And I'm going to move my artisan screen up and I'll just show you how we do this process. No one's jumping in. So I've opened up Artisan and I'm just going to create a 12 by 12 book. And you can kind of see here, these are two templates that was provided free by Pixels to Pages. This one is a 12 by 12 scrapbook page, and it's a 21 page default book project. The next one over is a 99 page default book project. So depending on how many pages you're going to do, either you can start with a 99, and if you don't have 99 pages, you can always delete, or you can start with a 21 and end up adding pages. So I'm just going to go with the 21. I'm going to just do this as a 24. I always name these pretty similarly. And I'm going to go test for digital. Okay. And then it will take a moment to create it. And the nice thing about the way this works is you can kind of see, I'm going to show all the pages here. They have right page, left page, and they are a little bit different because of the gutter in the center of the book. And Cheryl showed you the lay flat design where the gutter doesn't matter as much, but if it's the traditional design of a book, the edges in the seam, they're actually a little bit of curve. So when you go from the right and the left page, the things that you're doing is going to be dragging and dropping your photos right into that place. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my photos and navigate to that album. So bear with me as I pull up that. So this was a fairly thin album. So I am on this first album page, and then I'm just dragging that first page here And you can see there is a little bit of trim around the outside that is still white. So if I don't want to leave that white, I can change the color. And sometimes it's easy to judge what color you might want to use. And sometimes you have to go a little ways into the album in order to see that. So I'm just going to pick a solid color, and I'm going to pick one of the grays and kind of like that. Just going to kind of go with that. And then you go to the next page. I'm going to change this from all photos not used so I don't accidentally drag the wrong one in or duplicate it. And then I've got the next page. So it's pretty much as simple as that, so it's really not that hard to do that. If I want to view what this 2 pages look like, you can see this is how these 2 pages look like. If I have them bound, you can kind of see how it will line up. And once you've finished dragging and dropping all of your photos in, you can go ahead and proofread it and get it ready to order. There are a couple of things that sometimes I like to do. So I'm going to go back to the all page view. So sometimes there is some of this image that's cut off, and I've had, I did one for a customer who wrote right up to the edge. So in order to adjust this image to have the entire original scan in it, if you right mouse click and you go aspect ratio, restore original aspect ratio, did you see that it kind of just adjusted and I actually gained a little bit more space? I'm going to undo that because you can kind of see when I add that, it will end up adding the rest of that image in there. So that's especially important if you have things going right on up to the edge. So restoring that original aspect ratio will end up allowing you to see everything that was on that page. So that I tend to do that before I go ahead and order my book. So that was a really quick preview of that. The pages, or the cover, you could do whatever you wanted. You saw what we did with Cheryl's. We took a picture and made it the entire cover. And with Artisan, you have the ability to do whatever you want. I could design a cover. We could take one of the pages and do that as the cover. It's up to you how you want to do that. So just kind of reiterating, when you are going to convert some of your traditional albums to digital albums, there's a lot of good reasons for doing that: to conserve space, to preserve those books, to ensure that you have some actual copies of it just in case something happens, because we've invested a lot of time, energy, money, love, heart, sometimes even blood, maybe if you've cut yourself on any of your scrapbooks like I have, into all of these albums that we've made. And it'd be really sad if they weren't able to outlive you. So converting them to traditional albums, those traditional albums to digital books is a great way to do that. And are there any questions from anybody?
There's a comment in the chat, Kari.
Okay.
The chat.
I can't. Oh, yes. So Ola had an experience with somebody else's book, and I think she was willing to talk about that tonight. Ola, go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing, and I will spotlight you for a moment. So you want to share your experience?
Yeah, I had a client who contacted me. He had been driving his truck. He was going to bring me his album to digitize, and it was worth the first 50 years of his life. And he had an accident the night before he was going to bring it to me, and he hit a deer, I believe it was, and totaled his truck. He was fine, but he totaled his truck. And in the process, the album that was sitting on the back seat flew out of the car and got buried in mud. And he couldn't find the album for days. And so he was just very distraught. And turned out about a month or so later, the detective from the police station called him and said, "You're never going to believe what I found." And he found the album. Somebody had found it and turned it into them. The album was sticking nose down in the mud. And I've got some pictures if you want me to share, Kari, about how that turned out.
Sure.
Sorry, working on it.
That's okay.
Can't see much there, can you?
No.
We see a
We
blue
see your
flower.
background screen.
Yeah, it's here. Nope. No, it's artisan. Never mind. Okay. So this is actually the album cover.
Oh,
Can you
Oh,
see that picture?
wow.
oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the album cover.
Oh,
These are some of the page protectors and pages that came out of it.
oh,
These are some of the pages.
Oh, my
oh my
goodness.
goodness.
Yeah, and I could not send it to Forever. Forever declined to work on it because of the damage to their perceived damage, potential damage to their equipment. There was no way they could guarantee that this mold and mildew would not remain in some place on their equipment and then damage another person's product. In addition to that, the safety of their staff. There was no way to really ensure that their staff was going to be fully safe around the moldy and mildew pages. And they definitely were quite smelly and very, very damaged. As you can see, it took about 8 or 10 of those photo cleaning cloths that we used to get, and about 4 pairs of white gloves for me to go through and clean them off as best I could. Yeah, I'm working on the pages, but this is like the first page in the album. And I did just what Kari was saying. This is a picture of the page. I took a picture of the pages, and then that picture I brought into Artisan, and this is that first page. Now, there's not much I can do with this face on here, but there are some of the things I can do on some of these other pages to make it look a little less bad. But short of actually taking each individual picture and having it restored professionally, some of these are just going to be a lost thing, but he is going to be happy. He said he's happy with the fact that he got these back and that there's anything we can do at all to help him. He's just delighted to see that. So it just speaks to, I should have gotten to him sooner. He should have brought it to me sooner. Something like that, that we would have gotten his albums digitized. I'm working on mine, but I'm not anywhere near current either. But it sure speaks to the other day, two weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, there was a tornado passing through. And as I went to the tornado shelter with my dog, I thought about the fact that I had an empty Forever digitization box in my apartment. And I was really wishing it wasn't still in my apartment empty. I was wishing I had sent some of those albums in. So it just speaks to the importance of having things backed up.
Yes.
So,
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. I'm so glad that that he's gotten it to you now, and I wish, it's been a process trying to get it dealt
sure.
with. But and it's a miracle that they found it, right? After all of that, to have it reappear is kind
Right.
of amazing.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion. You might I would call the Natural Science Museum in Houston. Their conservators deal with mold and muddy things a lot here from hurricanes,
Right.
and they may be able to give you some suggestions.
I think that's a good idea. I appreciate that. I think it's certainly worth the call to ask. I think before we sent it anywhere, he's not financially in a place where he could pay significant amount of money to have this restored, but I certainly think it's worth a call. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks, Joyce.
they may offer you a way to be sure the mold doesn't continue. However, scanning it the way you did you have done a wonderful, wonderful job with it. I've restored a lot of old photos, and you can do some individual work on those
Right,
photos,
right.
and
I know I can
it's
do that on some of them. There's a few,
very time
yeah,
consuming.
and there's a few of them he may want to send in to be professionally restored, for sure. But he's going to take much of it as it is just to have any of it back. But good
I
suggestion.
do
Thanks, Joyce.
understand.
Yeah,
Yes.
And our
Yes.
hearts all break just looking at that album
know.
going, oh my goodness. So there
And
was
I
another
think
question. Oh, sorry. There was another question in the chat about what if you had peekaboo pockets? And that is really up to you. You can actually scan it with the peekaboo pockets. You can scan it without the peekaboo pockets. I did an album for somebody whose heritage album, the peekaboo pockets had letters in it that they wanted to retain. And so I took those out of the peekaboo pockets, scanned those independently, and then we added an additional page digitally to the end of the album. So it's up to you what you want to do, whether you have it scanned with the page protector on or off, or whether you have the peekaboo pockets. There are a lot of times where we have flaps on albums or a card or something that we want to get the inside of. So whatever way you want to do it, you can definitely do that. The other option with the digital printed book, you can actually add peekaboo pockets right in that book if you need to. So there's lots of options and lots of possibilities. So Carmen, I hope that answered your question. Are there any other questions before we stop the recording? All right. Well, Colleen, if you're able to press record, thank you very much for everybody for your time. And those of us who are here live.